I am Tarık Toros, and welcome to this week's What's Happening in Turkey. Mass arrests, social pressure, and a struggling Turkey at home and abroad. This week we are diving into a wave of mass detentions that shook Turkey. Arrests targeting journalists, academics, cartoonists, and politicians. These actions aren't just about silencing dissent. They highlight the Erdogan government's growing struggles both at home and on the international stage. Let's start with the events that unfolded in Turkey. On November 26th, Turkish authorities carried out mass detentions, arresting 231 people across 31 cities. Among them were journalists, writers, academics, human rights activists, and opposition politicians. Even protesters who took to the streets that they were detained. The main targets, individuals linked to the Kurdish political movement. Government-backed media was quick to brand the detainees as terrorists tied to the PKK. Lawyers were denied access to their clients. And case files were sealed under confidentiality orders, a tactic we have seen time and time again. This is nothing new for Turkey. Arrests are often vague, with charges taking months or even years to surface. Some detainees were jailed, others released under judicial control. Now they wait indictments and trial dates remain uncertain. But these domestic crackdowns don't exist in isolation. They are closely tied to Turkey's challenges abroad, particularly in northern Syria, where the situation is rapidly escalating. On November 27th, northern Syria saw some of the most intense fighting in years. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, a dominant armed group in Idlib, launched an offensive and captured several villages near Aleppo. The Syrian army and Russia responded with air and ground strikes, resulting in hundreds of deaths and raising tensions across the region. To understand HTS, we need to take a step back. This group didn't emerge out of nowhere. It evolved from Jabhat al-Nusra, al-Qaeda's Syrian branch. While HTS claims to have severed ties with al-Qaeda, its ideology remains deeply rooted in jihadism. Today, it controls Idlib and is a key player in the region's instability. Turkey's relationship with HTS is complicated. While the international community, including the US, designates HTS as a terrorist organization, Turkey maintains indirect dealings with the group as part of its efforts to manage the conflict in Idlib. Now, let's focus briefly to London, where a related development took place. On the same day as the clashes in Syria, November 27th, British authorities conducted a counter-terrorism operation, arresting 7 individuals. Among the locations raided was the Kurdish community center in Haringey. The operation drew large crowds of protesters demanding answers. The Metropolitan Police reassured the public that there was no immediate threat, but emphasized that the arrests were linked to very serious allegations involving PKK-related activities. For context, the UK has designated the PKK as a terrorist organization since 2001. Now, back to Turkey. The Erdogan government continues its contradictory approach toward the Kurdish population. On one hand, it hints at reconciliation. On the other, it appoints trustees to replace elected Kurdish officials and arrests journalists, politicians, and activists. Meanwhile, Abdullah Öcalan, the PKK imprisoned leader, remains under strict state control after 25 years. Discussions of his potential release are tied to vague and tough conditions. In November, 6 Kurdish cities had their elected mayors replaced by government-appointed trustees. Protests erupted but were swiftly met with heavy police force. International criticism is mounting. In Brussels, Nacho Sanchez Amor, the European Parliament's Turkey rapporteur, called the trustee appointments a blatant attack on democracy. Speaking during an EU-Turkey Parliamentary Committee meeting, he highlighted human rights abuses, including the so-called girls case. "You are prosecuting girls of 14 years on terrorism charges," he said, "and they are being asked by the judge, why did you go to study with your neighbor?"
The chapter 23 is about judiciary and fundamental rights. The Commission report says there are no progress. There is a way to say you reach a so low level on democratic standard that is impossible to worsen. You are asking the European Union to open the judiciary, the chapter on judiciary. You are prosecuting girls of 14 years on terrorist charges. They are being prosecuted in Turkey on the terrorist charges. And they are being asked by the judge, why did you go to study with your neighbor? Your appeals court sued and prosecuted criminally your constitutional court. Do you really think you are prepared to open the chapter 23rd?
Sanchez Amor was referring to a case from May 2024, when Turkish authorities detained 14 high school students aged 13 to 17 for alleged links to the Gülen movement. 8 of these children remain jailed, and their next hearing is scheduled for next month. Meanwhile, Turkey's operations against the Gülen movement are now in their 12th year. On November 19, a raid across 66 provinces resulted in 459 arrests. The accusations, as usual, lacked clear evidence. Suspects were questioned about ordinary aspects of their lives, daily routines, neighbors, even their study habits. And what about the Turkish public? How are they reacting to all this? For the most part, there's silence. State-controlled media ensures that these stories rarely reach the public. Independent outlets are under immense pressure, while protests are met with excessive police force. People remain uninformed, yet silence doesn't mean agreement. It simply reflects the environment of fear that has gripped the country. This paints a grim picture of democracy, press freedom, and the rule of law in Turkey. But history tells us one thing. Truth has a way of emerging, no matter how hard it's suppressed. When that day comes, those witnessing today's repression will have stories to tell. Stories of how the silence was finally broken. I am Tarık Toros. Thank you for watching. And see you next week on What's Happening in Turkey.